Hey everybody, Real with Wes. Hope everybody's doing well today. And if you're not and your day's going kind of different or weird, hey, I pray God turns that day around for you and you experience God's best today. So let's jump right in this though. We're talking about being informed. You're like, man, is this part about being informed in the Bible? Of course. You get scriptures like rightly dividing the word of God. It talks about that. There was many a times when you talk about processing information, the word talks about guarding your heart, your mind, your soul, all these different things about renewing the mind. All those things are about processing information. There's a lot of various things, but I want to be also very practical in those things when we approach the word, when we approach our relationships, we approach business, we approach day-to-day life. Being well informed is important. And we talked about day one, making a quality decision. You can't make excuses being like, I just didn't know. Now it's okay if you don't, but once you realize that, go get informed. We're dealing with a lot of things in life right now where information is a high premium right now, and information is hard to get it in its purity is what it is. So we need to be wise. We need to be smart in how we're getting our information, because we will make assumptions. We'll make our decisions off that. We'll make our feelings and our emotions, the highs and the lows of our day, and how you feel each and every day. And I emphasize feel. We based on information. If you misperceive something, or if you perceive something correctly, all that is about getting and collecting information and then bringing that before God and making well-sound decisions in your life is what that is. So let's get into day 3. Let's talk about set good boundaries. It is important when you are going to be well-informed to set good boundaries. What are your feeding sources? Where are you getting your information? And boundaries. Now, church is typical when we talk about boundaries, like, anti this, anti that, but then we'll go to some of the most foolish feeding sources at the same time. And it's not about being anti really anything at all. If you can get away from that moment, you can actually just make real practical decisions and make wise judgment in all things. So let's talk about one first thing. Manage exposure. Manage your exposure to certain things. People are like, don't watch the news. That's not accurate. You need to be informed. Don't do with social media. Man, you can get a lot from social media and connecting and things like that. And once again, it's not about being anti. Don't do this, don't do that. There's always a lot of don'ts a lot of times. And it's really managing how much you expose yourself and prioritizing your exposure level to certain things. When you get them out of order, when our exposure is to God ultimately in our relationship and our time with Him, and your responsibilities as they flow. It shouldn't be the news taking the place of that, or social media. It's when you get them out of order, the exposure rate is there. Then that exposure is going to look different for each person. Each person has their own unique different things and triggers and past experience they went through, that things they're more sensitive than other people are more sensitive to, are more triggered by sometimes. And that's okay. So you got to learn on your individual personal space how to manage those boundaries. Well, how do I do that, Wes? Look at your emotions. What do you mean by that? Allow the emotions to be the gauge. Now, sometimes your emotions can be high and positive, and you shouldn't be watching that, some stuff, but that's not what I want to get really over into. That's a whole different conversation. Let me not even open that and go that direction. Look at, after you are exposed to certain things, where your headspace is emotionally. If it is negative, if it is despair, if it is all these different things, downward spiral, then you have overexposed yourself to it. And sometimes you have to take a step back, cut it off for a little while, and reset yourself. Sometimes you have to just realize you're not in a position that it's a violation to you personally, not someone else. Leave everybody else alone. We're talking about managing you. So it's where you are. Now, if you're coming off angry, outraged every time and not coming off just informed, it's overexposure is what that is. And sometimes it may be, let me limit the time is what it is. It isn't just completely cut it off. It's a limitation of the time. And that's why I talked about prioritize, but your emotions will tell you. Man, I see people even coming off listening to a minister, and they come off more mad about it sometimes. Now, some of that's because it challenges you and it's going to provoke some things out of you. I'm not talking about that where you just hide from confrontation and growing in maturity. I'm talking about, though, that some of the toxic emotions shouldn't come out of that. every time. You shouldn't lose all your hope and all your peace and everything else. Sometimes people shut things off like, well, I don't want to hear something that's opposing to me. Sometimes you really need to hear diversity. I'll get in that later this week. If something makes you feel uncomfortable, you don't like something you hear, that's not an excuse not to listen to it. I'm not saying that, but I'm talking about, man, when it comes to especially your spiritual well-being, your overall life force and energy level, if it's tearing it all down, your inner person here is what it is, man, then you may need to tune that off. So that's one thing. When you're setting good boundaries, what your feeding source or relationship, set the context in the purpose of being influenced. Determine the purpose of that relationship. And that may even be when we talk about the news, you understand the purpose and the context of what you're getting that information for, and keep it in its lane many of times. Sometimes people are more of an expert in certain lanes. As a pastor, I try to be very careful about this, where I'm influencing in my bubble, in my lane. One example is I don't try to pastor someone who's in somebody else's church. That's not my business. That's meddling with stuff. I pastor here. It's like I parent my son is what I do. For example, I'm a husband to my wife. It's setting the context of that. So you need to understand the purpose and the context of what you're feeding from and being influenced by, and just understand, hey, they fill this lane, but don't put them in something they're not, because that's going to get you misinformed. Don't go to the car mechanic, for example, to talk about get your annual physical for your body. No, you take your car to the car mechanic because they're a specialty in that lane to inform you about that lane, and you go to your doctor about getting informed about your medical health is what you do. That's just an example. So define the context of how in the relationship of what the purpose in being influenced there. So, and then the last part I tell people to set good boundaries is making personal time and space to process things. When you feel overwhelmed, or even when you don't, when you're receiving information, you need time to mull over it, not to worry about it, not to stress about it. It's that time you spend it and you submit it before God. This is so key. I hope you hear this more than anything all week. You gather all this information and you sit between you and the voice of God, and you say, let me sort through this. Let me sort through how it made me feel. Let me sort through how it's thinking and wiring, so I can adjust if I'm thinking wrong, if I need to correct some things, if I need to renew my mind to some things, if I need to be more open-minded, if I need to adjust in any way, or either I need to say, you know what, I have peace about this, and this is the way I need to go with it. It is so important to create that personal space and time, setting good boundaries, to go over the information that you've been. Sometimes I have to sit on the shelf for about a day and come back to it. Sometimes I'm too emotional, I'm too tired. It's like I need to go take a nap and then come back to it. All those different things are about setting that personal time for you to be in a healthy position to approach that information in a healthy manner, in a neutral manner, without your biasness and everything else, in a productive manner. All this is going to lead to good mental health, by the way, quality decisions in life, healthier relationships, and good collaboration with the Spirit of God to experience God's best and grace in your life. All this is by simply being well informed and knowing how to process information. Some of these basic keys would keep us out of a lot of the grief we're experiencing right now, especially as the church and as the body of Christ, where we would not pull on traditions and fantasies and religions and all this other garbage, that we come up within ourselves, actually, more than we just being anti the world. Well, the world's influence. The church has got a lot of bad influence it's got to deal with too at the same time. So it's renewing our minds, knowing what to do with information. Why? So we can be happier and healthier and experience real peace and experience good relationships and make quality decisions where we experience God's best. And that's what I encourage you to do. All right, guys, it's gone long enough. That's day 3. Tomorrow we'll come back with more, and I'll give another layer. Whenever I do these Real with Wes, and especially the practical ones like this, know I'm highlighting a piece. It's like a mini sermon all through the week, because I'm almost at 10 minutes. So you take 5 days of 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes, you got a 45 to 50 minute message after there. So each one of these points are meant to tie together. So make sure you connect them, or it's going to be kind of incomplete and you're pulling fragments of information here and there. All right, guys, though, that's all I got for you today. Hope that helps you, gives you clarity, gives you insight, and gives you wisdom how to easily navigate life. And I'll catch you tomorrow.